Um, do we have an intro? Okay. This is what this day is filled with. This day is filled with working on the cuff and, you know, talking about news as it happens, talking about things as it happens. So appreciate you guys for joining us for our typical free agency frenzy show that we do each and every single year. This year's a little bit different. This year's a little bit different, right? We got the brand, we've got the company, the logo everywhere. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you guys for making us a part of your daily routine. We'll be live each and every single day, Monday through Friday, as we'll be talking everything through. I know people were like, where is Malik, right? Where is Malik? Wasn't on State of the Jungle last week, but I'm back. I'm good in health, guys. I'm good in health. Just had a little emergency, some stuff we had to deal with here, but we are back. We're back. We're back. We're back. All right, we're going to be talking about some of the biggest happenings around the NFL today. Obviously, the Bengals made a couple of signings. Old friend Samaje Perine is back in Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bengals signed Oren Burks. The Cincinnati Bengals also went out there and signed TJ Slaton, big nose tackle, 6'5", 300 some odd pounds from the Green Bay Packers to help out new defensive line coach Jerry Montgomery. The Bengals did a couple of interesting moves, right? You think about it. They brought back DJ Hill. This is a spot in which, it feels like the Bengals are trying to kind of recreate the magic they had during the Super Bowl run by these little tier-ish moves. We'll see how they work out for them. I'm excited to talk about it. But before we even jump into the Bengals, Daniel, let's talk about some stuff that happened around the NFL today. First of all, I can tell you right now, I thought some people, got paid a little too much.
Yes.
Aaron Banks cashed in huge at the guard spot, which is going to affect the Bengals as well because the Bengals are looking to add a guard. Mm-hmm. Names have been mentioned to me at the guard spot. We'll see if they actually wind up working with those said players. I'm excited to see sort of what happens with that. We obviously will get more clarity on that as it pertains, but I'm a little disappointed, to be honest with you, in the Bengals. Let me just be honest. I'm disappointed. I was told we'd be aggressive in adding a guard or two in free agency. That is what the talk of the combine was. That's what the talk the last few weeks have been. I genuinely thought the Bengals' first move would be, hey, let's sign a guard. Let's add talent. And now, obviously, there's still some names out there. I still expect them to add a draft pick there. But it's interesting to me. It's interesting to me that they didn't add it. What move, before we jump into the Bengals talk, what move today out of free agency, I guess, caught you off by surprise? Was it a trade? Was it a signing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and two breaking news kind of happened. Dre Greenlaw to the Broncos.
Yeah, okay. That was a move. That was a guy that we talked about here on State of the Jungle about potentially, being a Bengals fit.
And then one more, Najee Harris potentially joining the Chargers.
Najee Harris joining. Yeah. That's an interesting move because he doesn't really fit what they do.
Mm-hmm. And just looking at the rest of them, I think the biggest team to talk about definitely is the Washington Commanders, right? They're a team, they made a big time move to go get the left tackle. They made a lot of other big moves. And their team, I think you have to applaud them for going after their Super Bowl window, right? For whether this is going to end up working out for them or not. They're going after it, right? You go out there and trade, your Deebo Samuel, or you get Deebo Samuel, an obvious need at wide receiver. And I think their team, they're trying to follow what the Houston Texans kind of did last year, but they're trying to go and actually do the damn thing. And I think that they've got the quarterback to do it. They've got the sense of urgency with their new front office. Shout out to Adam Peters. Shout out to, their new head coach, Dan Quinn. And they're a team, it doesn't seem like they're done. So I think you have to give them the props. My only concern is they are giving up a decent amount of their picks, right? And I think that they're banking on the previous guys. They're banking on Jerzon Newton, Johnny Newton, saying, hey, Jonathan Allen, you're out. And Johnny, you're going to be our star at the interior spot. So I'm kind of curious to see how this turns out, but I applaud them for going after it because teams like the Dallas Cowboys. Malik, we talked about, an interesting stat. The Cowboys haven't signed an outside free agent for more than $6 million a year in the past 10 years. So they are just retaining their own talent and going as if it's status quo. So I applaud the Washington Commanders. Another team, the Seattle Seahawks, I feel like is a team that isn't getting talked about enough, and rightfully so, right? They traded away Geno Smith for just third-round pick. But man, you look at the draft picks that they have. They have a first-round pick. They've got multiple seconds. They've got the third round. They've got, I believe, 7 or 6 picks in the top 100 in this year's draft. And you get Sam Darnold. You get 7 years younger at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
And their team, I feel like, at least they're not teetering around the middle of the road. So I applaud them for that. And I think the Seattle Seahawks, I think they're doing it right. You brought in a new head coach last year, and they're a team that they're not just going to roll with a Derek Carr. They're not just going to roll with a mid-level quarterback. They're saying, hey, we're going to get Sam Darnold. At least it gives us a shot for a guy who's only 28 years old, and we're going to get younger in the draft. They got rid of DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett is out the door. So I applaud the Seattle Seahawks, albeit they haven't made a ton of moves. I just applaud the Sam Darnold for Geno Smith swap. I think is a massive thing for them. So that was definitely one of the other big things. Another one, Josh Sweat. I thought Josh Sweat was, I was expecting him to get at least 20 million. So I think for the Arizona Cardinals, they're a team that is kind of in this phase of people are saying, well, trade Kyler Murray. If you trade Kyler Murray, what are you going to get back? What is your alternative goal? And I think that this front office with Jonathan Gannon, you have to go after with Kyler Murray. He's a young quarterback. He's a guy that was drafted with the #1 overall pick. And you have to see this through. And I think they would be kicking themselves if they didn't go after these guys in free agency, right? If they didn't sign the offensive lineman, if they didn't go after Josh Sweat, who is projected to be their premier pass rusher. They just signed Akeem Davis-Gaither. So the Arizona Cardinals have a golden opportunity, I would say, to really make this happen with Kyler Murray. And I think that respectfully, this is their last shot. So I think the Josh Sweat thing for me, he made himself a lot of money in the Super Bowl, but he was a guy where I'm super confident what he's bringing to the table. And I think if the Cardinals can get an interior pass rush, that's the name of the game. And I think we could see Josh Sweat creep up to that 10 to 15 sack number this upcoming season. So that was another, like I said, I was really impressed, at least with the Josh Sweat signing for the Cardinals.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of some of these move. Go ahead. What's up?
Yeah, just one more. The Justin Fields thing, respectfully, here's my opinion with this. I like that they're taking a shot with Justin Fields. The $40 million for 2 years, it seems like they're not fully sold on him, but I'm just tired of people disrespecting these other quarterbacks. Respectfully, if Justin Fields deserves a chance, I think Zach Wilson deserves a chance.
Yeah.
And that's where these guys who are quote unquote retreads, we've seen that work a lot more. Sam Darnold, it worked out with the Vikings. Baker Mayfield, it worked out with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Justin Fields, when I watched him with the Steelers, he was 4-2 with them, but he didn't look like a superstar quarterback. So I say all that to say I'd still be interested to see if they're going to go after Shedeur Sanders, maybe. But that was just my thoughts on Fields.
We're definitely going to get some questions. Davis, chill on me, my man. The reason why I said it was interesting is because the Bengals were telling everybody, insiders alike, team people that cover the team, that they were going to be interested in, being aggressive when it comes to the guard market. And the longer you wait, the more that these guys sit out there, the lower their price drives down. And you start to wonder, well, if a team is in, better standing, because you never know what some of these players' motivations are, but if a team is in better standing than the Cincinnati Bengals from a roster construction standpoint, would these guards that we're talking about for the Bengals potentially adding, would they be more behooved to join another team versus joining Cincinnati? That's the whole point. The longer you stay on the market, the more competitive it gets, obviously. But obviously the price drives down a little bit degree. But if you have a huge market for a player, I'm actually surprised that Tevin Jenkins hasn't signed anywhere yet. Everything that I heard regarding Tevin Jenkins was going to have a insane market, and a lot of people were excited about him because they thought he had a lot of untapped potential. There was even some people out there that were saying, you wonder if Tevin Jenkins played for a different team that was not the Chicago Bears. Some of those injuries that happened, right, where he was, one thing the Chicago Bears people always say is, Tevin Jenkins, he found himself by a tent quite often. But a lot of people were wondering if he played for a different team, right, a team that was more competitive, would he be more inclined to play through some of those nicks and injuries that he did maybe suffer that you see most offensive linemen throughout the NFL sort of play through? One thing's for sure about Tevin Jenkins, when he's out there, he's dominant. He's dominant, right? Another guy that we expected to cash in so far, we haven't seen it just yet. Will Fries.
Yes.
Will Fries. I personally didn't understand the hype for him. I didn't understand the hype from him, but guess what? This is a guy that a lot of people thought maybe Will Fries might cash into a big deal because the first 5 games he played with the Indianapolis Colts this season before he went out for the year, he looked good. Like a completely different player. But one thing that I often said was, hey, that does not absolve him of how he looked the previous 2 years, one of the most penalized guards the previous year. I don't think you just immediately turn the corner there. Mekhi Becton. You have to ask yourself, Mekhi Becton hasn't been signed yet. He's coming off of a Super Bowl. He went to Philadelphia. There's some talk there that Mekhi Becton actually wants to return to Philly, right? There's some talk there that Mekhi wants to return to Philly. And you have to ask yourself, he won a championship with Philly. Would he want to stay at a guard spot, right? There's some question marks there. Would he want to stay in Philly where he was able to retool his career? Would he want to play at guard? There's a lot of contributing factors when it comes to Mekhi Becton, right? We don't know where he wants to. He has a lot of critical decisions to make. And for me, that's going to be interesting. That's how this whole guard market for me is it's just interesting to see how it all shapes up. You look at it, some of the defensive ends that we're talking about too as well. Guys like Azeez Ojulari, right? Mm-hmm. Still sitting out there. Guys like Chase Young, still sitting out there, right? Well, you can't have enough pass rushers in the National Football League. What teams will go out there and say, hey, you know what? We'll go out there and, spend big money on said pass rushers. I was actually surprised, like Malcolm Kuntz, he went back to the Raiders for a 1-year deal, $12 million, right? Mm-hmm. This is a guy that a lot of people thought might have cashed in. We know the Bengals are interested in bringing Joseph Ossai back. Does that deal happen? Does that deal come together? It leads me to believe, hear me out, very much like what happened a couple years ago with the linebacker market, right? With the tight end market. Mm-hmm. A lot of these guys are entering free agency and they're not seeing the deals that they thought they'd potentially get on the open market. Yeah. Joseph Ossai's agent, I can tell you 100%, thought that Joseph Ossai might cash in. But again, when you have a defensive end heavy draft, a defensive line class that's pretty stacked, that's the strength of this year's draft. It drives the value down on a lot of these guys. So what happens with the value of guys like, like a Chase Young? What happens with the value of a guy like Azeez Ojulari? Because these in years past, these guys would have had so much money thrown at them. To be honest with you, Josh Sweat signed for less, right, than what a lot of people were anticipating. But that's what's happening. We're seeing the market value for these defensive ends drive down. There's a lot of stuff we need to talk about, man. We got to talk about Trey Hendrickson. At this point, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, does it behoove you to keep Trey Hendrickson versus trading Trey Hendrickson? This is a real thing. And it sucks for a guy like Trey because it feels like there might have been teams that might have been willing to pay a lot of money for Trey Hendrickson. But because the guard market shaped up how it has, well, because he wants to stay in Cincinnati, he wants to play for the Bengals, does it behoove him to stay in Cincinnati and take a smaller deal? Or will the Bengals move that offer from $23 million up more? Who knows? But one thing's for sure, that should not stop the Bengals from adding more pass rushers to the defensive line. I like Cedric Johnson, right? Even if you bring Joseph Ossai back, that's fine. None of those moves should stop you from adding more to the defensive end position. Should not, right? When you get to that point in the draft at 17, you should be able to draft best player available because you're not pigeonholed by anything. And I agree with you saying, Delta Sapphire. I do agree that his agent screwed him in a lot of ways. I do believe that. It's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be interesting. While we're here, make sure you guys do us a huge favor. We got almost 300 people watching us live in the chat. We greatly appreciate you watching us. Make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. And for those that are used to us having for those that are so used to us, for those of you that are used to us having a intro, I apologize. That intro was not played. I think we have a pretty sick intro. But I want to jump into some of these moves a little bit more. Where you want to go first, Danny? I'll let you start for the Bengals. Let's start talking about some of these moves the Bengals made. Let's talk them all through.
I mean, we can do the most recent one. We can talk about Oren Burks, and he's a guy where, you look at the linebacker position. First off, this is a need, right? Akeem Davis-Gaither out the door. He was the prime backup for Jermaine Pratt, the prime backup for Logan Wilson. We saw this year wasn't like past years. We had some health concerns at the linebacker position for the Bengals. And who was the guy that stepped up? It was Akeem Davis-Gaither. And albeit I understand that people want the Bengals to get younger, and that could still happen in the draft, right? Burks is 30 years old, but this is a dude who played significant snaps this year. This was a dude, if you look at his PFF grades, maybe his past 7 years weren't great, but he played significant snaps in the biggest game of the year. He played in the Super Bowl, and he was arguably one of the best guys. People give all the praise to Zach Bond, but Burks is a true linebacker. He's a middle linebacker. And when I saw him, watch him play, this is a guy, he just makes big plays. And it's kind of reminiscent to what the Bengals got with Jermaine Pratt, right? You looked at his playoff run this year. He had a forced fumble in the game against the Green Bay Packers. He had a forced fumble in another game. I believe it might have been the Chiefs game. He sacked Jaden Daniels in the Commanders game, a massive game for the Eagles. And this is a guy, he just got great speed, right? Great sideline to sideline speed. He may not be the number one cover guy. He may not, be the greatest at covering, tight ends, Travis Kelce, but he's super intelligent. And the number one thing I personally don't want in a linebacker, I want a guy who can get to his run fits. And I don't want a guy that is discombobulated. He is a veteran at the NFL level. And that would be the concern with going with a guy that, drafting. He's never at the wrong place. And he's always got his eyes on the quarterback. And if you go rewatch that Super Bowl, he was rarely faked out by the Xavier Worthy end arounds. He was rarely faked out by Andy Reid, drawing all these things. He's always in the right place. And I think that whether he is the starting linebacker or if he is the supplemental linebacker, he's a guy I'm confident looking at him saying, hey, if he is in a pinch, he is going to be a very, very good linebacker. Yeah. So I was very impressed. And the fact that he did it in the playoffs in the biggest stage, 3 straight games, I think that should give Bengals fans all the confidence that he's a solid linebacker.
Yeah, let's talk more about a guy like Oren Burks, right? Came out of Vanderbilt, ran a 4.5. He was a pick in round 3, 80th selection. PFF grades him extremely high. Extremely high, Danny. I'm talking about his overall defensive grade this year for 2024 was an 86. They ranked him, again, 4th out of 84 linebackers in total defense, right? He had a 77.1 run defensive grade. Pass rush grade was even high, 72.3, right? We know how the Eagles, we know Vic Fangio love to blitz his linebackers, and his coverage grade was an 82.4. Now, here's why this is so important. In Al Golden's defense, anybody that Al Golden adds to his defense, especially the linebacker spot, right? You're going to play a lot. You're going to play a lot. You're going to play a lot because he runs a 4-3. He runs a 4-3 defense. So, Rory, we can exclude that nickel corner, right? I expect a world in which we see a guy like Jordan Battle playing more down in the box. I expect him to run a 4-3 defense. I expect Oren Burks, who has the smarts up here, equally as athletic as well, playing alongside a guy like Logan Wilson. I expect these guys are going to be a good fit. I think him and Logan Wilson together are going to be very, very good together. I believe that. Who's going to be that third linebacker? That's the question. Akeem Davis-Gaither is not an Arizona Cardinal. So that's not happening. Jermaine Burton, that ship has sailed. Jermaine Pratt, sorry. So Jermaine Pratt. Well, it's okay. I sound like I'm on ESPN or NFL Network. Like I don't know who the Bengals players are. But you look at it, Oren Burks is a guy that makes a lot of sense for them and what they're trying to get across. It's a move I like. I like the Oren Burks move. Listen, I liked him when he was with San Francisco. I liked him when he was with the Green Bay Packers. He has produced everywhere that he's been. He finds a home in Cincinnati. This is a guy they're going to be relying a lot on. And you know what's crazy? Even though he's 29 years old, he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires. This is a guy, right? He's even lined up at slot cornerback. PFF has him listed for 32 snaps at slot corner. Well, you don't want to see him in that spot, but if you've seen him out there, right? I saw him guarding the tight end out there several times for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a guy that really was able to do a lot of good stuff for this Eagles defense. He fit in like a glove. And this feels like it has Al Golden's his handprint written all over it to me. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, and I'm excited about the move. Daniel, who you want to talk about next?
Yeah, and real quick, one last thing. The dude, it's 2 years, $5 million. Yeah. Like, this is when we talk about the underrated signings, this is something that has the potential to be that worst case scenario. Let's say if it doesn't work, okay, you're taking a chance on a veteran linebacker,
Mhm.
and I'm confident with what Al Golden sees. But the next guy, I think we could probably talk about just the defense tackle, TJ Slaton.
Yeah.
There, the timeline was on fire. Let me say
Mhm.
that when he first got signed, I understand it comes off as a lot of money, right? It was 2 years, $15 million.
Mhm.
From what I saw out of him and seeing, kind of what the discourse was, this guy is a massive human being. And this is something, it is a need for the Bengals, right? You look at their room, they aren't the most physically imposing defensive tackles. Chris Jenkins is a guy that has underrated strength. He's naturally strong, but he's not 330 pounds. Same thing. McKinley Jackson is more of a quick twitch type of, defensive tackle. Still can hold up in the run game, but the sole purpose of this guy, and he's going to play a lot of snaps. You're not bringing him in just to play, one down. I understand the what he did with the Packers. He played a lot first down, second down, and that is more of his role, a run stuffing defensive tackle. And like I said, what I saw out of him, he's the type of guy that you don't need to see stats out of. I understand 2 sacks in 4 years isn't good, but that's not his role. There's different roles for different defensive linemen. A guy like TJ Slaton, his sole responsibility is to let these other guys eat. And I'm very confident, at least from what I saw, that the Bengals at least have a body in that role. Like I said, you look at the team last year, they needed that,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
why we were pounding the table. For a guy like Tavondre Sweat, right?
Mhm.
Just a massive human being. And at the end of the day, worst case scenario, this is a guy you get in there on 3rd and short, on 4th and short. And TJ Slaton is a guy that just gives you something different in your defensive line
Well,
rotation.
I think the primarily thing they're looking at is they're looking at it getting a big body, man.
Yes.
Look at a guy that could hold up at the point of attack on these offensive guards and allow some of these other defensive tackles, guys like Chris Jenkins, right? Guys like, depending on who the pass rusher is here of the future, are those guys able to get what they need to get off because you now have a big body guy? And ideally, I'm looking at Slaton, and I'm looking at him as pretty much saying, okay, he's probably going to be a 2-down guy for the Cincinnati, but he's going to find himself in passing situations. The calling card on this guy is he is a monster in the run game, and respectfully, his grades do not speak to that.
Yes.
His grades do not, PFF's grades do not speak to him being as stout as he is. However, they do say that he had the best rush win rate out of anybody in the National Football League, number 1. That's what this guy is. So even though he has not necessarily produced at a high level, the one word I hate, intangibles. The intangibles says that this guy is going to be a lot better than what people expect. Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you look at what TJ is potentially bringing to this team, it also, respectfully, when we have the conversation, this ties into the draft. Guys like Kenneth Grant are not a priority. And you look at this, first down, second down, this fills a need.
Wait, you think they're not a priority?
Let me get to the point. Run stuffing defense tackle.
Okay. Because
Yes.
where I see it, I still don't know if the Bengals have a difference maker, a true elite interior defender, right?
Yep.
I still don't believe that they had that. And I still believe that this opens up an opportunity for the future.
Yes.
In my honest opinion. Right.
Yes, totally agree. And that's why I think the run stuffing lineman, that's where when you look at these guys, the Walter Nolan specifically, the Bengals have to sell themselves, and they have to see that Walter Nolan has the pass rush, ability and the pass rush upside. That's what I'm looking for now. And I think this is a perfect draft for that. I love the Deion Walkers, the Aeneas Peebles. This gives you more flexibility because you're not pigeonholed to looking for a guy saying, hey, well, he's also got to be a great run defender. That's not necessarily the case. You've got now Slaton, and you've got Chris Jenkins, who was allowed it as a phenomenal run defender, and now gives you more wiggle room to play with, right? And I think that this is a positive for the team. And once again, the statement you always say, free agency is to fill needs and draft is for the best players available. And this does it, right? You're not looking at, the draft and saying we need a run stuffing defensive tackle. You feel that need right now. So you can head into the draft. Hopefully they still add some pass rushers, but you can head into the draft with one less need cross off your board. And like I said, 2 years, $15 million. I understand how some people could say that's an overpay, but when you're looking to overhaul the defensive line, I think at least we have to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. And if he develops and plays this season as a first and second down guy, and he's a run stuffing big man that we're hoping he is, that's a major win in my book. If we have him on the goal line, if we have him third and short, I don't care about his stats, respectfully. If this allows a guy like Chris Jenkins to eat, if this allows BJ Hill to eat, that's what I want out of him. And that's my expectation for him.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a fair point. I think that was beautifully said by you.
I
What do you want to talk about next?
I think BJ Hill. I think
All right,
I think
Hill.
we
Let's talk about
have
BJ Hill.
to. BJ, the conversation with him, obviously great personality. I do think that he's been a little underrated, and I understand the concern with the BJ Hill, the age, right? But as you were saying earlier, I also don't feel like this signals that you can't draft a Walter Nolan in round one, or if you can't upgrade the pass rush. But BJ Hill has been their best interior pass rusher for the past couple years. And when you look at what he's done, and there's been many moments, something that I've been, personally impressed with him. The Bengals don't have a defensive lineman that can bat passes down, right?
Yeah.
The guy who was that for the past couple years was BJ Hill. And it was surprising. Multiple games he came up big, on the interior. And that's what I want out of interior defense linemen when it comes from rushing the passer. So BJ Hill, he's a guy, the system. He's been here for a long time. And I'm confident that he at least fills a need. And like I said, it's something where you're not heading into the season hoping that Sheldon Rankins is that guy. You know what you're going to get out of BJ Hill. He's not a superstar, but he does have serious upside rushing the passer. So like I said, I think the upside for him, those batted passes, I believe he has 11 batted passes in the past, 3 seasons. There's a level of consistency with BJ Hill. He may not be a superstar pass rusher, but I'm at least confident that even at age 30, he's not just going to fall off a cliff right away. So this wasn't the necessarily the Milton Williams or the Levi from the Lions move, but this is something that at least gives you a level of consistency at the interior of the pass rush.
No, for sure. I like, listen, I'm fine with the BJ Hill move, bringing him back. He's obviously, what he is. He's been consistent. He's been a pro's pro. The Bengals continuously prove why they won out in that Billy Price trade. Billy Price is now retired. BJ Hill's entering, if he sees the life of this deal, will be his 7th season in Cincinnati. So you obviously bring him back for a lot of reasons, mainly for the leadership, mainly for the production. You saw what he's all about. You expect him to continue to have a good career in Cincinnati. That all being said, none of that should stop you from upgrading at the defensive tackle position. If you have the opportunity to get somebody that is really, really elite position to change the game, you do that. But quietly, hear me out. Marissa Daniel, am I wrong? Tell me about this. Am I wrong for saying that maybe right before our very own eyes, the Cincinnati Bengals have recreated, at least in their eyes, the Larry Ogunjobi, Larry Ogunjobi, BJ Hill tandem? Hear me out. I saw a great tweet earlier today about, it was talking about, what's the kid's name? McKinley Jackson. And saying how he has a lot of Larry Ogunjobi to his game. His get off is extremely fast. You don't believe me? Go turn on the game against the New York Football Giants. It was. You saw what he could potentially be. But you recreate that. You replace the DJ Reader snaps with the TJ snaps, right? You hope that guy is going to be the run stuffer that you hope him to be. You got BJ Hill back in the fold. And now you have Chris Jenkins, who can also rush the passer effectively, maybe with BJ Hill or maybe with McKinley Jackson in there. To me, I understand the logic. I get the logic behind it all. To me, if you still have the opportunity to add a Walter Nolan, maybe in the draft, depending on what happens at the edge position, you do that. There's going to be some more things that I want to talk about as well, Daniel. But I think we should get to the Samaje Perine.
Forgot about that.
I didn't. It was the talk. People are like, why do we bring back Samaje Perine? Here's one thing I'll tell you right now. Consistently, a pro's pro and pass protection. He has Joe Burrow's trust. He had the Bengals' trust. The Bengals wanted him back before. And the Bengals break that old adage of, we don't believe in signing guys that are about to turn 30. Oh, they did it with BJ Hill. They're doing it with Samaje Perine. So that adage can be out the window. It's all about, do they value the player? Let's talk about Samaje Perine being back in the room, Daniel. Here's what I will say, though. I think that you have I want to be very cautious when I say this. I don't think that he spells Chase Brown. I still think there's another room for another running back to come here. I don't think Khalil Herbert is completely out the door, potentially still. You still need to add to the running back room. You still need to. Because if Chase Brown does go down, right, you do have to worry a little bit about Chase Brown getting the volume of carries that he had. right? That's a real thing.
Mhm.
And right now, you don't have a guy on the roster that you feel if Chase Brown was to go down,
Yes.
he could still offer those minutes. Now, can you sign a guy in the draft? Is a guy like Ollie Gordon a guy that you're interested in? Right? Who knows? But to me, I think it still makes sense for the Bengals to add a Samaje Perine, who you know what he offers in pass protection. You do know he also has some receiving upside. Don't sleep on it.
Yep.
I know the Super Bowl left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, but Samaje Perine still has some. He's a downhill guy. He's a guy that you can give the ball to in those short yardage situations. You know he's going to try to turn out yards for you. What are your thoughts on the Samaje Perine ad?
Yeah, I think in this was even some we had opportunity to talk with him, at the Super Bowl and just kind of off to the side. And he's a good guy just to add to the locker room, right? Regardless of what he's going to add. And listening to what Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin were talking about at the NFL Combine, they said Chase Brown is somebody we didn't expect, to fully develop into a potential 3-down back, but he's a guy that can handle the early down workload. And typically, in my mind, we talked about this on our other shows, I personally would want a 6'1" bruising back. That's what I want, right? I want a guy that can do it at the short yardage. But Samaje Perine at least gives the Bengals and Zach Taylor in this offense what they want in a guy. They want to be able to not have Chase Brown for all 3 downs. And Samaje Perine can immediately step in and be your 3rd down running back with no qualms, right? There is no concern about Samaje Perine being in on 3rd down. And respectfully, in this offense, you don't have to do a whole lot, when it comes to the receiving upside as a running back. You've got Jamar Chase, hopefully T. Higgins. You've got Mike Gesicki. If you're a running back in this Bengals offense on 3rd down, you can pass protect. And if you can just be open and catch the ball, in the flat, you are going to get yards and you're going to help this Bengals team out.
Mhm.
So they don't need a star, receiving running back out of the backfield. They need a guy who can do the pros work. They need a guy that can do the dirty work. And that's what Samaje Perine's doing for you for what, $1.5 million a year. So I agree with you. I don't think that this means they're done adding to the room because Perine isn't necessarily the greatest early down guy. And he's not the greatest goal line, running back. So I would be interested in see if they do add one of these guys in the draft, right? You've got some guys like you mentioned, Ollie Gordon's one. You've got some of these other running backs, whether it's a Caleb Johnson. There's a lot of these names, round 3, round 4, round 5, that if you're looking for a short yardage back, if you're looking for a big body running back, you can get it in the NFL draft. So I think this was much smarter than them going after an AJ Dillon or going after one of these big name running backs in free agency, because it gives you consistency and it gives you somebody that has had that repertoire with Joe Burrow, has had that consistency with this offensive staff with Zach Taylor and Dan Pitcher. So I like the move, and like I said, it doesn't exclude you from going after a guy in the draft. But once again, it fills a need. You don't have to go look at one of these guys in the draft and say, hey, he has to be a great pass protector. At this point now, I'm looking at a guy, can he do it at the early downs? Can he spell Chase Brown for the 1st and 2nd down on the goal line? Because we got Samaje Perine, who's 3rd down back. Chase Brown can also do that. So now it gives you a lot more room to play with. So Samaje Perine, these are the little things that the Bengals should be doing to at least fill holes on the roster. So I like the Perine move.
All right, can we get to the real stuff now? How many
Yes.
people we got watching us live right now, Marissa? We got 394. Basically, let's call it 400 people watching us live. Only 65 likes. First and foremost, we greatly appreciate everybody for tuning in, watching us live right now. Do us a huge favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if this is your first time here. We are live for our free agency frenzy. This is day 1. We'll be live each and every single day from Monday all the way through Friday. If there's big news happening through the weekend, we got you guys covered. This is our season. This is where we come alive. What I want to talk about now, man, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about what the Bengals, number one, you know what? I was going to talk about what they should sign next. I'm going to get to that. Let's start with Trey Hendrickson, though.
Yes.
What should the Bengals do there, Daniel, at this point?
Yeah. Well, I saw some people in the comments. I don't think that this means, you have to. Trey Hendrickson does not mean you have to draft an edge, and doesn't mean you're not going to draft an edge in round 1, right? At this point, Trey Hendrickson, in my opinion, I think he's going to be back. It seems like. I mean,
bro, can I be honest with you?
Yes.
If you sign Trey Hendrickson,
yeah,
which is still on the table, by the way, and you go out there and you say, you know what, we're going to add an Azeez Ojulari. I know some people don't like him, some people like him, and some people don't like him. You bring out Joseph Ossai, you sign Trey Hendrickson, and let's say potentially you sign, because remember, he's already under contract. So we shouldn't even say bring him back. Yeah. He's already under contract. But if you go out there and you sign an Azeez Ojulari and a Joseph Ossai, well, what does the draft look like now for you? Yeah. That's what keeps going on in my head. Mm-hmm. What does the draft look like now for you? What does it look like? To me, it looks a lot more favorable. Yeah. It does. Mm-hmm. You now have the entire board at your disposal. Yes. You now can start playing with trade back scenarios, although Bengals don't trade back. You now have a lot at your disposal. But right now, Trey's already under contract. Let's put that there. Trey's under contract. You have the ability to add another edge rusher in free agency right now. Yeah. And now your defensive line takes on a life of its own. Quickly, right before your own eyes, your defensive line is closer to the Eagles than it was the Bengals of last year because you made a lot of moves. You addressed what the weaknesses were. You added depth to the defensive tackle room. You brought back, well, he's still here, your sack leader in Trey Hendrickson. And then you add another edge rusher. And then you could still potentially go on the draft and add another edge. Now we're talking about the Bengals defensive line as a strength. And let's not forget about your former first-round pick and Myles Murphy. What are we cooking with now? That's my thought process. That's just my thought process.
No, for sure. Yes.
To me, it has changed right before our very own eyes. It has changed for the Bengals right before their very own eyes. Let's talk about, what they are. What we talked about what they should do with Trey Hendrickson. What do you think they will do?
I think you got to bring him back, and I think that they will. And once again, he's on the team. It's very difficult to look at what he's done, the production this guy's put up, and I understand how the Bengals typically operate. Right, age 30 is kind of their stone wall. But man, go turn on the tape and watch what this guy has done for this Bengals defense. And I understand the idea. Okay, well, do they get a first-round pick? Well, respectfully, the Commanders at this point, Malik, the Commanders were one in the landing spots. They're not going to give up a first-round pick after giving up their second round, after giving up their fourth round. Went out, they traded for Tunsil. They went out, they traded for Debo. It's very unlikely that they'll just get rid of this entire draft to go in for, a window now. And you look at these other teams that are slowly starting to fill up their needs, whether it's a New England Patriots, Arizona Cardinals were another team, right? They just signed Josh Sweat. These teams are slowly drying up for this first round pick. So are the Bengals going to be okay with a second round, maybe in a third rounder? I wouldn't be. And I understand the upside. Well, you get a second round pick, it frees up your draft. Free agency frees up your draft. So for me, I understand the notion of trading Trey, getting an extra second, getting an extra third. You get to play with more of these young guys. But the goal is to compete now. The goal is to win a Super Bowl now. And as we've all said, your team is much better with Trey Hendrickson on your roster now. What is the production that you have to replace if you end up trading Trey away? Do we trust a Shamar Stewart right away? Do we trust, a second-round edge rusher like Princely right away? I don't want that guy stepping in being my edge rusher one. So I say all that to say, I think how you attack free agency, I do think you got to get an Azeez / Chase Young / one of these edge rushers, situational pass rushers. And I think your team is so much better with Trey Hendrickson. So I think that they do have to give him that extension. And the reason why I think that is because I just struggle to see how this situation doesn't turn out muddy if he only has this 1 year. And at that point, if he starts sitting out, I don't know. I think you have to make him happy. And you hope from this situation, if he's going to be on this team, that he's hearing back from these other teams that they're not going to give him 33, that they're not going to give him 32. That's what you hope from the Bengals standpoint. But obviously, we hope Trey gets his money.
Well, yeah, you definitely want to enjoy. Trey's a friend of ours. He's a guy that treated us so graciously when we first got to Cincinnati. It was really, really awesome to meet him, hang out with him and his wife. It was great. But let's talk about now who we want the Bengals still to potentially add via free agency. So here's what I'll say. Let's talk about Azeez Ojulari for a second. Let's talk about Azeez Ojulari. This is a guy the Bengals went after at the trade deadline, did not come through. The Giants' asking price was a second-round pick. It was super high. and they just wasn't realistic. But in 4 years with the New York Giants, Azeez Ojulari registered 22 sacks. He registered 22 sacks. A lot of people thought the landing spot for Azeez might have been in Arizona with his brother. That did not come to fruition. They went out, they re-signed Baron Browning. And didn't they just sign another edge rusher, I believe?
Cardinals?
Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat. So that literally dries that up a little bit. Azeez Ojulari is a name that was flirted out there a lot. And I want to talk about that. Now, I know some people think Azeez Ojulari is a little bit overrated. But the one thing I will say about Azeez is his get off, his ability to apply pressure and wreak havoc in the backfield is really, really special. It's really special. And then I've always thought of the idea, because it's weird. Azeez is not the mold in terms of size that the Bengals typically go after. However, he is a guy that can get off the ball quick, very similar to Trey Hendrickson, pretty good with his hands, and can apply pressure to opposing quarterbacks. Imagine having two speed rushers in Trey Hendrickson and Azeez Ojulari. Imagine that. Joseph Ossai also is a speed rusher once he gets going. To me, I feel like he's a little bit slow off the ball at times. Yeah. For me, I want to talk about Azeez Ojulari, Daniel. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
He had 6 sacks this past season.
Yeah. I think free agency, a lot of this, Malik, is about whether it's a connection or whether it's a team fit. Something the Bengals have done time and time again. If you succeed against the Cincinnati Bengals, they've got their eye on you. And look no further than this year. We were at the game. Azeez wrecked the Bengals on multiple plays. He looked like the best pass rusher in New York. And that's something that I understand. It's just one game. This is something that Bengals coaches have to remember. Go ask Zach Taylor, who's the head coach of the Bengals. He's the guy that's looking at the film, rewatching this time and time again. Dan Pitcher. These are guys that definitely have, Zach Taylor definitely has a say in free agency. And Azeez Ojulari is the name that's out here that has done it against the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that this would be the team kind of changing their stripes. And he's a guy you don't have to shell out crazy money for. And he's a guy where you look at these rest of these names, right? The Chase Youngs of the world. I understand there's a couple other names we could get into, whether it's Caleb on Chason or Josh Uche. Azeez Ojulari is the name I feel like is the most likely, from not likely to re-sign with their team. I mean, they got Brian Burns and they have a big situation coming up with Kayvon Thibodeau. So he's not going back to New York. So he's on the market. And if I'm the Bengals and I'm looking for a pass rusher, that's who you get. You got a Miles Murphy on your team, whether they kick him inside or keep him on the outside. He is not necessarily giving you the juice that an Azeez would. So I'm very confident that if I look at all these names, he's the one guy that I'm confident and say, hey, he will upgrade the pass rush versus a guy like Chase Young, who's more of a well-rounded all-around pass rusher.
Well, you look at it. Well, PFF, I think he had about 6.5 sacks. PFF grades him with 7 sacks this season. You look at a guy like Azeez Ojulari, his run defense grade was a 60, right? Pass rush grade was a 54.6. Not always indicative of what, he actually brought to the table. When I look at a guy like Azeez Ojulari, I see a guy that, even though he might not always get to the quarterback, he's reminiscent of, to me, to a degree, Carl Lawson. A little more productive, but he's a little more reminiscent to Carl Lawson. Sometimes when he goes in for those sacks, it's a day late and dollar short. But I still think Azeez Ojulari is a guy that, under the right circumstances, he would really, really benefit being a full-time starter and being a guy that could produce. I just think having him and Trey mixing and matching would be really, really special. That's just my thought process. I think it makes sense. Yeah. But I want to talk about I want to talk about some more pieces the Bengals could potentially add. We could talk about defensive end all day. Yeah, I'm sure we'll go back to it. But let's move on back to the guard spot. The guard spot is a glaring hole for the Bengals still. A name that I was told a while back to keep an eye on for the Bengals was Tevin Jenkins. I have not heard much regarding the Tevin Jenkins market. A lot of people were saying that Tevin Jenkins was going to get out of this world money. He has yet to sign yet. Yeah. That could be people questioning his ability to stay healthy. It feels like the writing's on the wall for him in Chicago. They went out. They had Joe Thuney. They went out and they added, what's the other guy's name from the Rams? Jonah Jackson. Yep. So it feels like the writing is on the wall for a guy like a guy like Tevin Jenkins in Chicago. But let's talk about what his fit in Cincinnati could look like. Let me ask you this, Daniel,
Yeah.
because I don't know if you feel the same way I do. Because there's some names out there still, right? I'm surprised Asante Samuel Jr. hasn't even gotten signed yet, but that's a cornerback. We'll talk about that at a later point. Let's talk about Tevin Jenkins. This is a guy in Tevin Jenkins, right, who graded this past year, PFF grade 75 total, right? Total grade. His pass blocking grade was a 75.8. His run blocking grade was a 74.3. Have we seen a guard with those type of grades for the Bengals in the last 3 years? We haven't. The one knock when it comes to Tevin Jenkins is, can he stay healthy? Here's the number for you, Daniel. Here's something that's interesting for you. His rookie year, he was coming off of a back injury. His PFF grade was a 47.5, right? Porous, putrid. We all know he started a little slow coming out of back injury. He then was coming off the bench. He didn't start right away. He followed that up in 2022 with an 80 grade. The next year, 2023, 72.6. This year, 75. This guy has been consistent. He's a mauler in the run game. He's dominant. His hands are aggressive. He's physical. This is a guy that I'd be pretty excited about. They have the opportunity to right the wrong of the Jackson Carman pick for a lot of reasons. I know people are enamored. with Mekhi Becton. And we're going to talk about him too. But for me, I understand the love for Kevin Zeitler, former Bengals first-round pick. Love him, right? Great guy. The Bengals lowballed him last year. Bengals lowballed me before. And listen, they haven't been able to get that guy back in stripes. It would be cool to see that guy finish his career out. The cool thing about Tevin Jenkins, he could play left guard, he could play right guard. This is a guy in Tevin Jenkins who literally has played both. Does Tevin Jenkins make sense for Cincinnati? 6'6", 321. Certainly give him a huge lineup. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Tevin Jenkins, and this is where we will discuss some of these other guys, whether it's, Will Hernandez or James Daniels. I don't know if he necessarily signed. The Bengals aren't necessarily going to change their stripes when it comes to what they look for in alignment. And Tevin Jenkins, you got the size. And if you're heading into this offseason, you look at the holes that they're filling, running back for cheap, linebacker for cheap, obviously spending the defensive tackle, the one splash, it's got to be interior offensive line. And obviously, right, Jermaine Pratt's still on the roster, but if you cut him, you get more money. There is a good amount of money, and I would really struggle, and I would be a little frustrated if they went with these lower tier guys, maybe like a Will Hernandez, right? Just saying, hey, we're just going to kind of go and kind of just plug the hole, because if you're going about it that way, just keep Alex Kappa. But it's very clear by them cutting Alex Kappa, they want to upgrade at this position. And I really think the only way you upgrade at this position is if you get one of these top three guys. And Tevin Jenkins is the one where you could look at. Yes, he's got injury concerns, but he's got the youth, and he was dealt a shitty hand, respectfully, with the Chicago Bears. It didn't work out, and they're very clear with their intentions. It's not working out. New head coach, new OC. They brought in new guys, 2 new offensive linemen, Tevin Jenkins. It just ain't working out. We're cutting ties with you. So Tevin Jenkins, he's got to be the name that the Bengals fans are circling, saying, hey, that's who we should be going after. Because if it's not Tevin Jenkins, you're looking at these other stopgap guys, and even the Mekhi Becton conversation, Malik. Like, this is a guy we've seen 1 year of interior offensive line play out. And it was very good, but I think there's a lot more questions about Mekhi Becton than there is about Tevin Jenkins. I think the question about Mekhi Becton is, he was playing with the best offensive line in the league. We saw him for 1 year. What is, the upside with him versus Tevin Jenkins? I think that there's no way those two guys are on the same playing field. I'd be happy with the Mekhi Becton if Fries has already gone and if Tevin Jenkins is gone.
Both of the guys have the same question marks, though. The big question was, if you sign Mekhi Becton, could he stay healthy?
Yeah.
That was the big question. Yeah. Right? If you sign Mekhi Becton, could he stay healthy? Yeah. And the question is for Tevin Jenkins, if you sign Tevin Jenkins, will he be healthy? Well, the Eagles were willing to take that gamble. Eagles signed him, said, hey, you're not a tackle. We're going to put you in at guard. Put him at a guard. Because let me be very clear, because I think there's a misconception as well when he visited Cincinnati. When he visited Cincinnati, he was under the assumption that he'd be playing for a starting tackle spot, not playing for an interior. At that point, he wasn't really open to that possibility. Yeah. But Philly came calling. The opportunity presented itself, and it made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. So Becton goes to Philly. He literally reestablishes his value in the National Football League, and the rest is history. Now You have to ask yourself, when he's negotiating with these teams, he's talking with these teams, is he saying, hey, you know what? I am a guard, or I want to go back to playing tackle? Maybe it's just I only play tackle because they had Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson.
Yep.
Maybe it's that conversation. We have no idea. But one thing's for sure we can say is Tevin Jenkins is a guard.
Yep.
And let me be very clear. Signing back Cody Ford does not absolve you from adding two guards. Listen, the Bengals were saying they were going to add 2 guards for agency. Cody Ford is a good piece on the offensive line that has proven he could play tackle. He could play both guard spots. He's proven that, right? Okay. That all being said, if you have the chance to add a Tevin Jenkins, are you going to let the fact that you signed Cody Ford back for $6 million stop you of that? No, it shouldn't stop you of that. It's to say, you know what? No, we're going to go out there and we're going to add a guy that we think should really upgrade our spot. And honestly, he's a guy that we probably should have drafted when we had the opportunity to, and we didn't for whatever reason. But I think Tevin Jenkins, from my understanding, what he wants, where he goes, it isn't always just about money. He wants to have the ability to compete for a championship, something that he hasn't been able to do in Chicago throughout his career. He's made that known. Well, in Cincinnati, you have that ability. You could be part of the missing piece on that interior of the defensive line, interior of the offensive line. That's just my thought process there. You look at Tevin Jenkins's numbers, man. Like Tevin Jenkins has produced, man. He's produced at a high rate too. And I honestly think that he could be the missing piece on the Bengals interior offensive line. Like if they talked about, hey, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to go out there, we're going to really look to add, guard, add at the guard spot because it's not something we've truly done. Well, now it's time to put up or shut up.
Mm-hmm.
It's time now to put your money where your mouth is. You told everybody that will listen in earshot, hey, we're going to go out there, we're going to look to sign a guard, and now you have the ability to do that. I'm not a fan of Will Fries, but he's still sitting out there, right?
Yep.
Mekhi Becton is still sitting out there. Tevin Jenkins still sitting out there. But we could talk about the Mekhi Becton a little bit more, Danny, if you want to.
Yeah, no, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest thing with him is where is he fit best and where does he want to play? Because you do look at him, he entered the NFL as a tackle, and he played this year because they had 2 tackles that they were already confident in, so he played at guard. I think Mekhi Becton wouldn't
be. The Bengals have signed Joseph Ossai back to a 1-year deal, $7 million.
Yeah.
Bengals signed Joseph Ossai back to a 1-year deal. 1 year, again, sorry to pivot off of that. That's just that, again, that's a good piece that they signed, but that also the 1 year tells me that, hey, we still believe we need to see more from you. Now, does bringing Ossai back stop them from adding another pass rusher in free agency? Because I'm be honest with you, Ossai showed flashes, 5.5 sacks this past year, but was it enough? Was it enough? Genuinely asking that.
Yeah, I think Ossai, and this is weird, like, I think I don't think he stops you fully from the edge, because for me, even I've seen this guy have success, and we've seen him have success on the interior, and it's weird because he's not necessarily the biggest 280, 290, but this year, at least to me, it seemed like he played big, right? It seemed like, you go back and look at the AFC Championship game. I understand the one play, but you look before that, he was having one of the best games of his career, and he was playing on the inside. So I think he's a spot pass rusher on the inside. We've seen what, Al Golden likes to do a lot of times. Have 4 guys, even 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. Joseph Ossai gives you the flexibility to move guys around. And Malik, I think this could say, hey, maybe if you have Ossai, maybe you don't get an Aziz. I don't know, because you look at this now, Osai's there, Miles Murphy's going to be having to get snaps, Trey Henderson. So I still would be entertaining the Azeez Ojulari conversation. I still would be entertaining these because it is a 1-year deal. This doesn't mean that Osai's here for the long term, but Ossai was not a bad piece, like you said. And I think at the end of the season, we really started to see him coming on strong. And he's a guy where, like I said, he gives you the flexibility. And as a pure pass rusher, this dude, he's got some chops. And like I said, it's weird, but if I were to make a prediction, I think that this dude could have some success on the interior, whether it's, hey, you pair Chris Jenkins and Joseph Ossai on 3rd downs, or Al Golden likes to have 3 down linemen, right, on 3rd down packages. So you could have, your nose tackle. You could have Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson, and Joseph Ossai on the inside, and still have Trey Hendrickson on one side and have your, other outside linebacker. So $7 million may seem like a lot to some people, but it's about the years, and I think that it's worth the flyer. I understand the Dave Mulgeta conversation. Well, they got a deal done. So I think that you've got to be at least somewhat confident to give Joseph Ossai a shot. And like I said, I saw some good things, especially at the end of the season when you look at it, right? Ossai was playing, he played a grand total of 11 snaps on the inside for the first half of the season. After that, he played 85 on the inside. So it seems like after, the first half of the season, they played him on the inside a lot more, and that was a lot of it on third downs.
Right. And to be honest with you, with it, this 1 year deal was, hey, you know what? This is Dave Mulgeta and him saying, waving the white flag. Our market didn't shape up the way it is. Listen, if you really want me to believe that Dave Mulgeta signed, his client back to Cincinnati for a 1 year, $7 million, and his market was so robust, he had all these teams climbing, ready to sign him. That ain't true. This is proof of that. If you were truly getting what you were offered and what you were asking for, you would have not signed back here in Cincinnati for a 1 year deal and $7 million. You wouldn't have. This is an opportunity for him to build on the year that he had last year, right? And really show that, hey, I turned a corner. New defensive line coach, new defensive coordinator, more opportunities even potentially. What does Joseph Ossai look like now in Cincinnati? This is a guy Cincinnati has been super high on. He's had injury riddled all season. This last year was his first healthy one. Right?
Yep.
But has he turned the corner now? Is the 5.5 sacks going to build to even larger numbers? One thing about Cincinnati, I know the number doesn't look like that with Trey Hendrickson, but maybe they see something out of Joseph Ossai this past year, this upcoming year that makes them invest large dollars into Joseph Ossai long term.
Totally. And Malik, I'm cool with it. Like this, at the end of the day, he's 25 years old.
Yeah.
25 years old. And we all know the conversation coming out of the draft was, this is a guy who's injured, right? But you have to see the upside. You have to see what's a long-term potential. This guy's played 3 years at the NFL level. There's so many guys where we see go off to other places after 4, 5, 6 years and say, wow, who the hell is this guy? Where did he come from? I feel like the Bengals at least give themselves another shot to avoid being that. And I understand some people are like, oh, Joseph Ossai's a bum. He's a bum. Give him a shot. Like I said, he's got some pass rush chops. And when you look at what he did, at Texas, he was a major playmaker. And there's been many guys that come out of Texas. He was paired up with Demarion Overshown, right? The guy from Dallas Cowboys, one of the best linebackers, pass rushing linebackers I've seen. Joseph Ossai had the pass rushing chops in college, and we've seen him have some success at the NFL level. So worst case scenario, it gives you another body at the pass rusher saying, hey, we've got some upside with this guy. It's not, and this, with all due respect to the former Bengals, pass rushers, this isn't like a Sam Hubbard. This isn't even like a Cam Sample. Like, respectfully, those guys were kind of bodies in the pass rush. Ossai gives you actual upside with your pass rush, and that's what this Bengals defensive line needs. So 1 year deal, I'm not mad about it at all.
Okay. All right. Now, Dan, I want you to look down at your free agency list.
Yeah.
If there's one guy you want the Bengals to sign, can we talk about Asante Samuel Jr. for a second? Listen, I don't want to beat the horn and talk about cornerbacks right now. We have bigger needs at the offensive guard spot. We got guys like Will Hernandez, right? Who I wanted the Bengals to draft when he was coming out. They didn't. He's been a pro's pro. Obviously, he's coming off of an injury. But Asante Samuel Jr. is still sitting out there.
Yes.
And Dante Jackson just signed with the Chargers today.
Yep.
Which leads me to believe
he's gone.
Asante Samuel Jr. is not going back to the Chargers. Yeah. Would you?
I would. And the Asante Samuel Jr. conversation is, and the Bengals cornerback conversation, it's one of two things. You either want a veteran guy to come in and help out this cornerback room, or you want a guy with upside. And I think if you were to go out there and sign an Asante Samuel Jr., this is a guy who's super young. And once again, he was one of my favorite cornerbacks out of the draft, right? His dad was an absurd cornerback, and this dude is a playmaker. You go look at what he did at Florida State, albeit a little undersized, 5'10" He is a pure playmaker, and just context needs to be added with his time with the Chargers. This dude did not suck with the Chargers. Let's just put it out there, right? He had some bad years, but you had 3 different defensive coordinators. You had guys trying him out at the slot, trying him out at the outside. Asante Samuel Jr., if his market is not there, I would definitely entertain it. And the only downside with adding Asante Samuel Jr. is you are giving up the quote-unquote experience. You're not getting a guy who's had 5, 6, 7 years of productive NFL, experience. You're not getting a guy who can necessarily mentor Cam Taylor-Britt, who can necessarily mentor these guys because he's competing for his own job. So Asante Samuel Jr., I would entertain the conversation. Mm-hmm. And also, if you add him, once again, it doesn't force you, when you're looking at a Will Johnson in round 1 or you're looking at Benjamin Morrison in round 2, you're not, forced to take this guy because you're saying, well, Dax is coming off an injury. DJ Turner's coming off an injury. Mike Hill is gone. We've got a major need here. No, if you add Asante Samuel Jr., you look at your cornerback room and say, hey, we got 4, 5 guys that can compete and let the best, let the cream rise to the top. And I'd be very, very happy with it, but I'm also kind of concerned how much money he's going to command. Yeah. So I like Asante Samuel Jr.
Coming off an injury too.
Yes. But the player Asante Samuel Jr., I'm a fan of, and I think he got a bad rap in LA. And I think that this is a dude who's got talent to be a great number 2 corner at the NFL level. I'm still a fan of him.
I want to talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Some names that people are mentioning, and I feel like a lot of people are talking because they essentially believe the Bengals won't go where they should for the guard position.
Yep.
But people hear people talking about Brandon Sheriff. You hear people talking about Brandon Sheriff. You hear people talking about Kevin Zeitler.
Yeah.
Would you add older statesmen who've been playing, who feel like they've been in the NFL for so long? Would you resign, or would you sign Kevin Zeitler and a Brandon Sheriff to be your interior offensive lineman, and then sort of just figure out the rest as you go?
No,
I'm just curious. I don't know how I feel about it.
The priority needs to be first. There is a level, I think, and you hope it's Tevin Jenkins / Mekhi Becton and then Sheriff. I'm a fan of Sheriff. I think Sheriff is, a veteran, and once 33 or something, he's played 8, 9, 10 years. And I think he comes in, and I think he's a lot better than what Alex Kappa gave you last year. I think he's a lot better than what Cordell Volson gave you, but he's not a long-term fix. He's not a 3-year fix. So I think,
but at some point they have to get serious, right, about the guard spot.
Yes.
Patrick McCarry is a guy that I believe was just okay. He's played all spots, but for me, I'm looking at him, I'm like, that guy got paid. Dalton Risner's been available for. I'm
good off him, honestly.
Really?
And the reason why it's he's been available, and I'm of the camp,
he's been available, and it's like you haven't.
Yes.
But again, Mike Gesicki was available.
Fair.
And they didn't until they did, and when they did,
it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
So whatever's, but this isn't just a Bengals problem. This is a league-wide problem. Yeah. Dalton Risner has been sitting there. The Bengals loved Dalton Risner coming out Kansas State, and they traded back. Yeah. Right? They like for me, it's like you haven't made that a true emphasis, and the amount he's signing for is so insignificant, and the upgrade ability versus the rest of your interior offensive line has been so significant. He's so much better than the interior guards that they've had. Yeah. So much better than that. So I look at it and I say, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do there? Is he too nasty? Like is he too physical? Are we dealing with a Richie Incognito situation that really turned out to not be a situation? Like I'm genuinely curious. Like what is it? What is it about Dalton Risner that's scaring teams away? And even more so, we are now talking about that world. If you're not going to go out and sign a Mekhi Becton, if you're not going to go out there and sign a Tevin Jenkins, if you're not going to go out there and sign a James Daniels, who I'm good on anyway. But we are talking about you signing older guys at the guard spot. Kevin Zeitler's still been playing great. Brandon Sheriff has still been playing good. Are you willing to add those guys and get those guys in here as temporary clogs and then draft guys and say, you know what, you can learn behind these veteran interior offensive line that have been playing at an amazing level for so many years? Like, you're at that spot now where you have to consider all options.
Yeah.
You have to. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the Dalton Risner conversation fascinating. I really think that this Bengals team, I understand, and I like their approach right now. Sure, yeah, you're signing these guys. I think that they should be having much more urgency with these interior offensive line, right? Just because the league is going one way doesn't mean you have to follow that trend, because this very quickly could be Becton's gone, Tevin Jenkins gone, and you're sitting looking at yourself like it's Fries or it's these other guys. So Risner, if I were to make a prediction for why, I think that maybe he felt and his agent felt beforehand that he deserved a lot more money. He deserved elite caliber money, and they just weren't giving it to him. But he's also a dude who respectfully has earned a starting job for what, 2, 3 different coaching staffs.
76 pass block grade,
Yeah.
13th out of 135 eligible guards.
Yeah.
He was one of the best pass blocking guards this past year. He's 29 years old, right? 0 penalties, Daniel.
Yep.
0 sacks allowed.
Yep.
That sounds like heaven. Is Dalton Risner the Bengals this year's Mike Gesicki? And by the way, the asking price is realistic. It's realistic.
I don't even know what the asking price is, but for a starting guard,
well, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what his asking price is. Like, I'm paying
projected asking price.
Projected. I'm paying these guys $15 million if I view him as my 2-3 year starter at interior offense line, because what would that have done for the Bengals last year, right? You look at the 2 guys that they had, and I understand, well, the Bengals offense was great. What could they have looked like with a very, very good, a top tier interior offensive lineman? I think they could have looked a hell of a lot better. So I'm looking at, hell, if I have to pay one guy $15 million and then supplement Cordell Volson there and add a guy in the draft, I'm cool with that. But I think you can't leave free agency without a Jenkins, Becton / who we were just talking about, Risner. And like I said, I like Scherf. I think Scherf is he's a backup option. If you sign Scherf, it's more of like you're settling for a 1 to 2 year solution. And dude's going to be old versus Risner, Tevin Jenkins, Mekhi Becton. The hope is they develop into a top 10, top 15 interior offensive lineman. I think it's realistic that all 3 of those guys could. So,
like, I feel like interior offensive line is not a position that I'm to looking at the years and I'm like, I'm staying away, especially when a guy like Kevin Zeitler has shown no chances of slowing down. You feel like you don't need to press or do a full court press, so to speak, if you don't, necessarily if you pick up one of these guys and you get in the draft, if they give you what you're looking for, it could make a lot of sense. I don't know. Somebody said thoughts on Will Fries. I want to get to some questions too. Make sure while you're here, guys, do us a favor. We have almost 500 people watching us live. Only 124 likes. If you guys can give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, we greatly appreciate it. Somebody asked thoughts on Will Fries. I think I've been on record saying this. Will Fries was the most penalized guard the year before. I'm not a huge fan. I know he looked very, very good this past year. I know some people like him. I'm just not a huge fan of his game per se. I think that the sample size has been extremely small. And if we're expecting the Bengals to spend a lot of money on the guard position, I'd like for it to be more of a surefire thing versus a guy that had a good 5 games before he got injured himself for the entire season. That's just my thought process, because that's a kind of move that could make the Bengals say, hey, we don't want to invest big money in the guard spot again. So if they're going to swing big on a guard of a guy like swing big on a guard like a Mekhi Becton, swing big on a guard like Tevin Jenkins. Don't swing big on a guy that respectfully has shown very, very small sample size of what he could potentially be in the league.
Yeah, Fries, my concern with him is same with all anybody who's dealt with an injury. It was a major injury last year, out for the year. And that's my concern is you look at the grade last year, it was great. This would be a different conversation if he finished off the year like that. Like if Fries had a 8-game sample size, and let's say he came back from an injury and he finished off week 14, 15, 16, 17 looking like this, I'd be much more inclined in this. But with any player going on injury, obviously the guy is young, but it's still a major injury. So what does your team look like right now, right? You bring in Will Fries. He is your quote unquote big name free agent you're going to bring in, and you're banking on him to return from an injury. It's a little concerning. So I think Fries deserves to be in that conversation. Same with Tevin Jenkins and these guys. But that's where my concern lies with him is, hey, this dude's coming off an injury. Who's to say that it doesn't take him, 8 games to almost a full season to get back to where he fully was? So with Fries, that's why I think with him, at least it's smart that they're letting the market sit for him, because I think it would have been a dumb mistake if they would have pulled Miami Dolphins or the Panthers who signed the interior offensive lineman last year for crazy money. Like, I think that it's smart that they're holding off of Will Fries for now, because coming back from a major injury is tough.
Yeah. Last I heard, I think that he was expecting to get around $18 million a year, Will Fries. And so it hasn't shaped up this so far likely. I'm guessing most people around the league Um, I think most people around the league sort of had that had that question mark regarding him too as well.
Yeah, Matt Brewer said, can Jedrick Wills play guard? He was another name was interesting, right? He's got the connection, offensive line coach. I mean, he could. He's never played at the NFL level.
Yeah.
And I believe at Alabama, he never played guard. So that's you're banking on a lot. And I would be hard pressed to see the Bengals go for that guy as their number one interior offense line free agent. I like him, though. I think he got a bad rap in Cleveland. Obviously, injury concerns, but he's not your tier one offense lineman that you're targeting. Who's to say that that guy can't play guard? So
Right. He's got the size certainly, and if we saw a guy like Mekhi Becton make the switch over from tackle because he didn't have the feet for it to tackle. He looked good his rookie year. Didn't look good after that. But this is a guy that could make the wholesale switch and move into guard, and we'd have that'd be a huge offensive line with Jedrick Wills in place. But the Bengals talking about adding the Bengals talking about adding to the guard spot. We'll see. Let's get to some more questions, Dan. Let's get to some more questions. Let's answer your questions. Drop your questions down in the comment section. We'll try to get to a few before we head out of here.
for sure. And we got a good question, just
Yeah.
an NFL one in general. Jim Gegner, we appreciate you tuning in, man. He said, from across the league, who was the biggest overpay and who was the biggest steal today on free agency? I've got two first off.
Sure.
Biggest overpay, in my opinion, and I'm looking squarely at the New England Patriots. Carlton Davis for me. Like, I understand what they're trying to do. They got the coordinator connection there. But to pay this dude $20 million a year for the next three years, I understand they got money to play with. This dude has never played a full season at the NFL level. And for me, when I'm looking at somebody that I want to pair with Christian Gonzalez, I just think that that was an overpay for Carlton Davis. And a steal, I think that what the Raiders are doing, I'm buying in. Jeremy Chin for 2 years, $12 million. I think that when you compare what they were about to pay Trayvon Merrick, who went to the Panthers, $15 million, you get a guy for $6 million.
Yeah.
And Jeremy Chin, I'm fully bought in with, him being their starting strong safety. He had one hell of a year with the Commanders. So that was definitely my favorite steal and overpay.
Dan Moore was a huge overpay for the Tennessee Titans. I don't know what that was about. I thought for the money, Harold Landry was another one for the New England Patriots. That was a huge overpay. I think the steal might have been. It's going to sound a little boring me saying this, but I really believe that the steal. I don't know if I think the steal, or respectfully, might be Baron Browning re-signing back with the Cardinals. I think that guy has a lot left in the tank, and I think that for the Cardinals to commit to him, right? For I think it was a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
I think that tells you a lot about what they saw, and they were excited about it. And even though he got traded mid-season, right? So we didn't get a full scope of what this guy might look like. I think he's going to wind up being a very good player for the Arizona Cardinals. I think that was a really good player that they got on their hands.
For sure. We got Micah Duval 3 said, do you think we still attack the defensive line in free agency, even with the pickups so far?
Yeah, I think I still think I could see a world in which they do that. Listen, all they have done so far was add to the defensive tackle room, which was what they were always going to do. They kept their own in BJ Hill. They brought back, they brought back Joseph Ossai as well, right? But understand they were still interested in acquiring Azeez Ojulari, even with Joseph Ossai on the roster last year, even with Trey Hendrickson on the roster last year. You've lost Trey Hendrickson, so you still have a hole at that spot. So yeah, I can 100% see them still add to the defensive end room, especially if the market isn't shaping up the way a lot of these defensive ends thought that it might. Who that might be, I have no idea, but I expect them to still add a pass rusher. Also, I expect them to still add a guard as well.
And before we get to Tom Jones' question, Landon Van Steen and a lot of other people sticking with Edge said, do you guys prefer Chase Young or an Azeez Ojulari? I think they're two different type of, edge rushers. It depends on what you want, right? I always prefer pass rush, and I think that Azeez is definitely the guy that I would go with, right? He's the smaller guy. He's got the pass rushing chops, and he's a guy where it's very clear. Like I said, it matters so much about the team to player connection, and the New York Giants aren't going to re-sign Azeez versus when you look at Chase Young, the Saints still haven't made moves at the defensive line, so they could, keep Chase Young. So I would probably go with Azeez Ojulari. Chase Young isn't a bad shout because, like I said, he's an all-around edge rusher. He's still got the early first round pedigree, and he's a guy, he's got the Ohio connection. He's a guy I wouldn't necessarily hate to bring in, but if the fact that they brought in Joseph Ossai, keeping him here, you still got Trey Henderson, the conversation going. So I would prefer an Azeez Ojulari. But Travis Waller said, what happens to the young guys, Jenkins, McKinley, if we draft a Walter Nolan in round 1?
I don't think, respectfully, and that's a good question too, man. But I don't think you even worry about that. You think about, you say, hey, the cream is going to rise to the top, right? I think that if Walter Nolan was a Bengal and he became the player that you think he should become, and a lot of people think he becomes, that's a good problem to have on your hands.
Yes.
That's a problem that you sort of let flush yourself out. And if he winds up being the player you think he is, and Chris Jenkins develops and McKinley Jackson develops, well, some of these older guys can kind of find themselves out. That's not obviously saying TJ Slaton, the guy looks like from a run defensive standpoint, he might be everything the Bengals are hoping he could be. He's not a flashy pick, not a sexy pick, but he's a guy that gets the job done. Again, defensive nose tackles are not sexy picks, but they are extremely crucial because they could be the huge difference of you having, a defense that is good against the run or a defense that just completely sucks.
For sure. Tom Jones and some people were asking just if you've heard anything when it comes to the guard position or what you expect when it comes to that.
I've heard some stuff regarding the guard spot, but that was pre-free agency. It's gonna the biggest thing I was told, we got to see how these guys in market shaped up. So it was kind of contradicting to a degree because you can't say, hey, we're gonna be aggressive in the guard spot and then say, hey, we got to see how the guard shapes up. So for me, if Aaron Banks got the money that he got, what are some of these other guys are gonna get, right? Or some of these teams pissed that Aaron Banks got what he got from the Packers, or they looking at it like, okay, well, we value these guys at this price, so we're gonna go in. I still think that there's gonna be some moves being made by the Cincinnati Bengals. I do think that they're going to attack the guard spot. I just really hope that they don't shortchange themselves and try to get a fixer upper versus a guy that could truly make an impact, all because you weren't willing to go there and meet their asking price.
Yeah. We got Dylan Del Rio and Hude MD both talking about 2 defense linemen from the Cowboys, DeMarcus Lawrence, Chauncey Golston. Could they be possible for the Bengals? I like DeMarcus Lawrence. Only thing, I think he's got a connection with Dan Quinn, the Washington Commanders. And that's I just think that, man, these are 2 also older guys. Like DeMarcus Lawrence is a little older, so it's like, I would personally be interested. I'd be looking at all these guys, and Lawrence is a guy who's been extremely productive. So I think you have to you have to kick the tires on these. But at this point, it seems like, I don't know. There's a lot of these good veteran defensive linemen. We talked about Calais Campbell, Jonathan Allen, DeMarcus Lawrence.
And Jonathan Allen's already visiting the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
And then we saw Grady Jarrett get released today. He got scooped up right away. That's not shocking, right? Although I do think that his best years are behind him because of injuries and stuff like that. It was very interesting. Somebody said, Malik, before you leave, I know Ian Rappaport has said his own thing. Where are we on the Chase and Higgins extensions? And do you personally think we get them both done? I do think both deals get done. I'm not calling up to the minute asking for updates regarding it. Last I heard, it all came down to guaranteeing money beyond year 1, year 2. Obviously, the contract the Bengals are offering to Higgins, they want it heavily incentivized because he has dealt with injuries. We'll see what takes place. It really is a negotiation. It's going to take a little bit, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we got some questions. We can keep going whenever.
Let's do 2 more.
Perfect. Jacob Mann asked Mike Hilton, right? It seemed like Mike Hilton was fully out the door. Have you heard anything on Mike Hilton, or what's your expectation with him?
No, I haven't heard anything on Mike Hilton. I'd be shocked to see him back, honestly, because I think that more so. Al Golden's defense, you play a lot of man-to-man coverage. They're not always in the nickel for the money that Mike Hilton could expect to get, especially with Nate Hobbs resetting the slot cornerback market today, getting what he got. I don't know if I see it if it's a real potential. Mike Hilton's weakness is Al Golden's defensive strength, which is man-to-man coverage. He can be left on an island at points. I just don't see that happening.
For sure. And we got one last one from Sean Krutka. Do you think that the Bengals are being cheap, or are they being strategic with the free agency approach so far?
I always think they're being cheap, personally. I always do, until they show me otherwise, obviously. But I don't think that they are done either. I think they're going to keep going. I think there's a lot of talent that they can add. But again, the Bengals are always wait and see, let the market reset themselves. Usually wave 2 is when they really, really get active. Yes. With the new emergence of tampering period, day 1, that's usually like the first wave. The second wave will come soon. One thing's for sure, I expect them to have their guard whoever they're going to sign wrapped up by tomorrow. By the time we're live tomorrow, I would expect a guard to be assigned by the Cincinnati Bengals. I'd be shocked if it wasn't one. We'll see what takes place, but we got to see how a lot of these guys' markets sort of come down. Are these guys willing to take 1 year prove-it deals? Maybe they're coming off of a down year. Maybe they want to prove themselves. Maybe they want to reset their value in the league. You never know. It behooves them to sort of put themselves on these contenders teams to sort of really make a push. And listen, the Bengals should be interested in upgrading this defense at all facets of this defense, right? They can't cherry pick and say, hey, we're going to build this defense through the draft. No, if you have the ability to add talent, you do it. Proven pass rush talent too. You go and do it. What does that look like? Does that look like an Azeez Ojulari? We will see. We will find out. You can't wait and see. You can't be in wait and see mode. So it's going to be interesting to see what shapes up. Anything else, Dan, before we head out?
Real quick, I guess Adrian Cardoso said Javon Holland an option. Me personally, I don't think so. I think that dude is going to make a lot of money. And I think that the easiest connection for him is Minnesota, right? You look, they clearly need a safety. Cam Bynum gone. Trayvon Merrick got $15 million a year. Holland's got the connection with his former coach, Brian Flores. It seems very clear the Miami Dolphins, their relationship kind of is gone. And Javon Holland, you'd better be willing to shell out 18, 19, $20 million. He is the clear consensus #1 free agent on the board. So I wouldn't expect that Javon Holland. A name that I like, I'm curious to see where he goes, Julian Blackmon. I don't necessarily know, what his market looks like, but the Colts clearly got their guy, and Julian Blackmon is a guy who they weren't fully sold on, so he's definitely gone. So where else is he going to go? Great cover safety. He's plays the deep third of the field, and he fixes a lot of the holes that the cornerbacks kind of open up. So he's a very consistent guy. I believe he'll get somewhere 1 to 2 year deal, $5 million. Somebody that interests me when it comes to a potential safety, but I don't know if they make that move and just have him compete. I feel like you're either getting a massive upgrade or you're just keeping Geno Stone and rolling from there.
Listen, there's a good chance that I could be live again tonight. There's a good chance I could be live again tonight. We will see. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to day 1 of NFL free agency frenzy. I will update you guys as much as I possibly can on the minute as I hear things. But again, as news pumps in, we will have you guys covered at TWSN. We will have you guys covered on the Sit Down with Malik Wright's YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate y'all
Turn on
so
notifications.
Much. Turn on notifications too if you're in here. Make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications because you never know when we will be dropping a live and going live at the latest moment to break down the latest news around the league and, of course, for the Cincinnati Bengals. But until next time, we appreciate you all. There's only one way, and that is the right way.
All they ever do is win, so kick that, relax, the TWSN.
Shout out Young Swish.